This video is sponsored by War Thunder.
Stalin. A figure larger than life, and probably the man that pops into your head when someone mentions the Soviet Union. A single man that has single-handedly molded an entire superpower into his own image and cursed the image of communism for generations to come. But how was life like in the Soviet Union under Stalin's reign? How did he come to power, and how did he become one of the most infamous figures in human history? All this will be answered and more in the second part of the history of the USSR. If this is your first time here, don't forget to check out the first part on how the USSR came into existence as well. Prior to his death, Lenin left a letter where he criticized the Politburo and members of the party, which post-mortem would be taken as his testament. In it, he had particularly harsh words against a single member known amongst the party members as Stalin. Not seen by anyone else in the Politburo as a potential successor to Lenin, Stalin still had grave ambitions to become the next leader of the Union. Although Lenin's condemnation brought him great political humiliation, he was undeterred from fulfilling his self-imposed destiny. At the same time of Lenin's demise, factionalism, although banned, went on the rise again. The ruling party was divided more than ever before when it came to policy. In an attempt to resolve this, the party underwent some democratization, where candidates for the local elections were broadened. Stalin, who was then the head of the party secretariat, used this to his advantage and selected favorable delegates to join the Congress. In turn, this granted him larger influence as he was able to pick up people most favorable for him. But the problem was, there was a much more favorable candidate to take over Lenin's legacy. Trotsky. Seen as a founding father of the revolution and the organizer and the leader of the Red Army, Trotsky was the favored successor of many. In addition to this, he was a prominent Marxist intellectual and theorist whose ideas garnered great popularity. As such, Trotsky was very staunch regarding the policies he supported. At the time of the succession question, one of the main issues the Soviet Union struggled with was how to pull the economy out of the dumps. The solution to this problem, as most saw it, was the industrialization of the country. Factories and manufacturing needed to be built up for the Union to leave poverty. However, there was a problem. For such high ambitious projects, large amounts of capital was needed. And to put it in terms everyone can understand, the Soviet Union was broke. Most of the bourgeoisie were either kicked out of the nation or killed, and most foreign investors, well, wanted nothing to do with the state. Thus, the main question debated by the Politburo was how to acquire the finances to industrialize. Great leaders, we've completed the plans for the new steel mill in Sukchina, but we're struggling to find finances for realization of project. Have you tried raising taxes on the peasants? We have, but we're still short. I have idea, comrades. This is genius, comrade! We are rolling in cash! I will murder that man. Trotsky, although a staunch communist, argued that some policies needed to be toned down in an effort to gradually ease the state into a proper socialist society. In this debate, he insisted that the Soviet Union should soften its stand against capitalist countries and try to acquire such capital from Western investors. However, Stalin was a staunch opponent to this idea, where he argued for socialism in one country. Instead, he argued that the money should come from the peasantry by imposing higher taxes on them. This idea became increasingly more popular, and Stalin was able to persuade a good chunk of Trotsky's allies to join the opposition against him. As such, Stalin gained the upper hand, and a couple of years later started utilizing terror against his opposition by expelling them from the party and deporting them from from Moscow. Trotsky was labeled as an oppositionary, and in 1927 he was sentenced to internal exile in Central Asia. 2 years later, he was forced into exile from the entire country itself and named a traitor to the revolution. With his main rival gone, Stalin was then able to fully consolidate power by delegitimizing other candidates for their, get this, Jewish origins. At the time, anti-Semitism was becoming increasingly popular, and the majority Russian population was heavily critical of Jews being members of the government. Thus, Stalin, having put most of his loyalists in the Congress, discrediting other rivals based on their Jewish origins, and exiling his main rival, was able to become the supreme leader of the Soviet Union in 1929. But as Stalin was able to dominate his rivals, you too can dominate the battlefield with War Thunder, baby! War Thunder is the most comprehensive vehicle combat game ever made, and is available now for free on PC, consoles, and mobile devices.
Free?
Immerse yourself in the intense combat of War Thunder, where you can take command of over 2,500 incredibly detailed tanks, planes, helicopters, ships, and other vehicles from 10 major nations across the globe. On top of that, you have my favorite feature where you can customize your vehicles as you like, give it realistic or historical markings, or be as ridiculous as you like. Show your skill and dominate your opponents as you face off an international community of over 70 million players in epic PvP battles garnered with realistic graphics and authentic sound effects, perfect for any connoisseur of military history. If you're not into realism, War Thunder has you covered, as you can choose between 3 distinct game modes such as Arcade, where you can get right into the action with fast-paced matches, where you can blow others and yourself up to your heart's content. While for more hardcore players, you have Simulator mode, which makes you feel like you're out on the front yourself, and every move you make can be your last one. Now, War Thunder has an all-new mobile version as well, available on iOS or Android, allowing you to try hard on the front line no matter where in the world you might be.
Sir, we're about to take off. Please switch off your electronic devices.
Woman, can't you see I'm wrecking nerds? So, what are you waiting for? The game is free and available on PC, PlayStation, Xbox, and mobile. Click my link down below and get your massive bonus pack that includes 100k Silver Lions and 7 days of premium account that's available for both new and returning PC and console players that haven't played for 6 months. But watch out, this deal is for a limited time only, so go and claim your pack right now. Upon seizing ultimate power for himself, Stalin was able to shape the Soviet Union as he saw fit. The way he'd do so was via putting in motion 3 major policy shifts: rapid industrialization via the 5-year plan, agricultural collectivization, and cultural revolution. However, as I mentioned previously, the government struggled to get most of the population on board as working conditions and poverty reigned rampant. So, in an effort to make the population submit, Stalin unleashed a campaign of state terror against any would-be dissenters. Supreme Leader, we've caught another class traitor selling our communal grain for profit. What shall we do with him? Give him punishment worse than death. 10 hours of watching dating podcasts.
I could have 18, 30, 40, 50 women pregnant at the same time. As a female, you can only be pregnant by one man at a time.
I can't take it anymore. Government propaganda machines continuously published articles declaring that there was an imminent foreign threat against the country as Western capitalist scum were preparing to attack the Soviet Union. As the population got scared, thousands of engineers and factory workers were accused of industrial sabotage and spying and subsequently put on show trials. To acquire capital for industry, taxes were raised further on the peasants, which naturally enraged the class. To put them in their place, Stalin claimed that the wealthy peasants, known as kulaks, were holding back grain from the market in an effort to drive the prices up. Laws against hoarding were adopted, and thousands more were prosecuted and killed for alleged sabotage. While at the same time, peasant autonomy was crushed and farms became fully collectivized, banning the private sale of agricultural products. Collectivization wasn't planned through at all. The giant collective farms were too big for a village to work on, and there was a severe lack of modern farming supplies and equipment. Additionally, these peasants who were provided with modern tractors and farming machines didn't possess the knowledge on how to operate them. Furthermore, ethnic minorities were also severely targeted by this program. Nomadic peoples of Central Asia and Siberia were forced into compulsory sedentarization, because of which many revolted and fled to neighboring China. Other times, ethnic minorities such as the Germans and Ukrainians were en masse labeled as kulaks and forcibly deported into the harsh Siberian core lands. In response to the collectivization policies, many peasants slaughtered their livestock instead of giving it over and hid grain from the collectors. Traders and small-scale retailers also became targets of the government. Overnight retail and small manufacturers were banned, and many of those who previously partook in those trades were jailed. Without real planning, there was a giant vacuum for goods, as the state didn't immediately provide alternative national retail and manufacturing alternatives, which turned into a shortage and rationing crisis with a booming black market. During the change of economic policy, the Soviet Union was also undergoing a change of culture. One of the first staples of life that was attacked was, naturally, religion. Urban collectivist brigades, upon coming to the village to impose the new ways of collectivism, would subdue the peasantry by vandalizing local churches, taking off their bells, and using them as scrap metal, digging up graves, and dancing around with the skeletons from them. Priests would be arrested and deported to Siberia, while others would be paraded down towns while being publicly mocked and burned. In Muslim-majority areas, women were forced to take off religious headwear. In universities, many professors became ridiculed and a target by their students, who forced them to implement Marxist texts into the lesson plans. However, some positives did arise from this chaos as well. Affirmative action was established and prioritized women, poor peasants, and minorities deemed backward in education programs and managerial positions. The main focus of the nation's transformation was centered around industrialization. One of the core policies that would help the USSR achieve greatness was the 5-year plan. The plan aimed to rapidly develop heavy industry, mining, metallurgy, and machine building, with the goal to double the nation's investment in these industries over the next 5 years and triple the output from the pre-war level. But even with squeezing the peasants, satisfactory amounts of capital to achieve this grand ambition was, never realized. Great leader, the collective OnlyFans are not bringing in enough capital to continue our industrialization plans. What should we do, alright comrades? Any suggestions?
Maybe allow some small-scale private enterprises and tax their profits?
Any other suggestions? Okay, what if we just get drunk, are you following me, and forget our problems? Genius, Vladim! Start up the vodka factories immediately! Instead, Stalin turned to vodka production in an effort to fund industrial projects. However, as a result, alcoholism spiked and the standard of living dropped. In an effort to lower the costs of rapid industrialization and reach target levels, women were allowed to enter the workforce, while peasants were encouraged to move to urban centers and become factory workers. The mass amount of imprisoned class enemies also became a key component in this industrialization project, as they were put to work in labor camps known as gulags, which provided essentially slave labor in the realization of these industrial projects. For most of the early 30s, the state was propagandizing the successes of the plan. The media was constantly publishing about new factories, railroads, hydroelectric plants, amounts of ore mined, energy produced, all the while food shortages and consumer goods shortages remained rampant. As a result, corruption and the black market flourished. Workers, managers, government bureaucrats, and virtually everyone and anyone would steal resources from their workplace and trade it with others for goods from their workplace. Even so, the first two 5-year plans generated decent results, although with great human cost and waste. At the time, the Union claimed that between 1928 and 1932, the state had doubled its GDP, and doubled it yet again during the second plan, essentially claiming that it had achieved an annual growth of 17%. Today, on the other hand, that claim is contested, and both Western and Russian analysts believe it was more akin to about 10% annually. Industrial goods like iron, steel, oil, coal, and machinery saw a rise, but most consumer goods except for vodka saw a steep decline. By the end of the two plans, the Soviet Union had an unemployment rate of practically 0%. However, other social issues were more than prevalent. With the high investment in industrialization, there was a giant deficit of funds for social programs such as welfare, which were only available to workers in key industries. Food shortages also became a consistent factor throughout urban centers due to this hyperfixation on industry. Some would even argue that agricultural collectivization set back the nation decades and caused mass famine throughout Ukraine and parts of southern Russia and Kazakhstan. One of the most notable ones is known today as the Holodomor, which is debated on whether or not it was systematically imposed on the Ukrainians and if it qualifies as genocide, with Ukraine and the majority of the West seeing it as such, while Russia and its allies denied as being intentional. Overall, it is estimated that around 5 million people died as a result of it. With the conclusion of the two 5-year plans, Stalin became the nation's poster child. Many credited all achievements the country had made to him, and praise for his achievements over everything and anything was abundant. Over a couple of years, the man had become a figure larger than life. The country had made strides to diminish poverty and raise the living standard, and many harsh policies started to be lifted. Rationing was discontinued and consumer goods started hitting the shelves. Peasants were allowed to privately grow non-grain crops and own one cow. Detained engineers were slowly being released back to their old jobs, and new work benefits emerged, such as the state-sponsored vacations and rest homes. Hell, a new constitution was even adopted and the class war was proclaimed over. But even so, many, especially within the Communist Party itself, were resentful of Stalin due to the disasters caused by collectivization and mass persecution. After the death of his wife in 1932, Stalin's mental health took a plummet, and the supreme leader of the Soviet Union became increasingly paranoid of people being out to get him. This way of thinking only worsened when in 1934, a member of the Politburo ended up being murdered by a disgruntled citizen. Stalin, alongside other members of the party, suspected that this had been done by a foreign agent in an attempt to destabilize the country. Further paranoia ensued with the rise of the Nazis in Germany, who had promoted themselves as staunch anti-communists. These events sent Stalin into a paranoia spiral where he started suspecting other party members were out to get him. In a knee-jerk response, he had 2 of the prominent opposition members arrested. Then, more people started to be labeled as class enemies, and mass deportations ensued yet again. During a party membership review, hundreds of thousands were expelled due to suspicion of being opposition sympathizers and were put on watch lists. Election nominees were severely restricted and a plethora of show trials ensued, which saw a new wave of convicts enter the gulags. Denunciations within the party became rampant, as everyone suspected everyone of being an opposition sympathizer and foreign agent. Others that weren't so lucky were convicted of espionage, treason, terrorism, or wrecking and sentenced to death. Industrial leaders and factory managers became special targets for executions, as they'd be blamed for practically all accidents that would occur at the workplace. They'd be accused of wrecking and sent in front of a firing squad alongside regional party secretaries who would be charged for abuse of power, dictatorial methods, or even nepotism. Minorities would be accused of bourgeoisie nationalism or loyalty to an outside power and shot for that. Military generals and officers weren't lucky either. Many of them were accused of conspiring with the Germans and prosecuted accordingly. Hell, even Politburo members couldn't escape the carnage and were also laid to waste. These mass state-sponsored executions and forced labor convictions came to be known as the Great Purge, which lasted all the way until 1938. It is estimated around 700,000 people were executed and over 1 million were sent to the gulags. As a result, the remaining administration and managerial class was severely understaffed and filled with newbies, most of whom just graduated from their schools, which, as future events would attest to, ended up being disastrous for the country. Again, thank you to War Thunder for sponsoring this video. Don't forget to play it for free on PC, PlayStation, Xbox, or mobile now by using my link in the pinned comment or video description. New and returning players that haven't played in 6 months will also receive a massive bonus across PC and consoles, including multiple premium vehicles and other goodies. Available for a limited time only, so make sure not to miss it. And as always, a big thank you to the members who support this channel. If you wish to have your name on screen, consider becoming one of them. My name is Janos, and you've watched Living Ironically in Europe.
Hey, why